Patria o muerte. Venceremos.
How do you measure a revolution? By the governments it topples? By the lives it changes? Or by the ghosts it leaves behind? History has no shortage of revolutionaries. Most are remembered in history books. Some are remembered in monuments and statues. But there are only a few whose face, or the silhouette of it, becomes more famous than their name. This is the story of one such revolutionary. For some, he's the patron saint of resistance. For others, the patron saint of violent revolution. Perhaps no other figure of the 20th century has been trapped between myth and memory quite like him. This is the story of Ernesto Che Guevara, the man who stood before the United Nations demanding to be heard. It was December 1964. The Cold War had frozen the world into rival camps. Every sentence was designed to avoid another global crisis. Then came a man who had no interest in careful words. For nearly an hour, he challenged the most powerful nations on earth. He spoke of revolution, colonialism, injustice, and the price of freedom. Not as a politician, but as a man who believed history could be forced to change. He accused the United States of supporting dictators while speaking the language of democracy. And when he reached the end, he left the world with 7 words that would become inseparable from his legend.
Patria o muerte. Venceremos.
Homeland or death, we shall triumph.
Esta disposición nueva de un continente de América está plasmada y resumida en el grito que día a día nuestras masas proclaman como expresión irrefutable de su decisión de lucha, paralizando la mano armada del invasor. Proclama que cuenta con la comprensión y el apoyo de todos los pueblos del mundo y especialmente del campo socialista encabezado por la Unión Soviética. Esa proclama es patria o muerte.
This isn't the story of a man frozen in a photograph. It's the story of an idea that crossed borders, survived bullets, and continues to divide the world nearly 6 decades after the man himself was buried. It's the story of an idea so powerful that even death couldn't kill it. The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it. Karl Marx wrote those words almost a century before Ernesto Guevara was born. Few would attempt to live by them as completely as he did. The year was 1928. In the Argentine city of Rosario, Ernesto Guevara de la Serna was born. He suffered from severe asthma throughout his childhood, but despite his illness, Ernesto developed an insatiable curiosity. He read poetry, he devoured philosophy, he studied politics. Eventually, he enrolled in medical school. He wanted to heal people. It seemed like an ordinary ambition. But history rarely announces the moment when ordinary lives stop being ordinary. Sometimes, all it takes is a journey. In 1951, Ernesto climbed onto an old Norton motorcycle with his friend Alberto Granado. Over the next several months, they crossed thousands of kilometers through Chile, Peru, Colombia, and Venezuela. What they encountered wasn't the postcard version of South America. They found miners coughing up black dust after 14-hour shifts, farmers living on land they didn't own, children without medicine, families trapped in poverty generation after generation. At a leper colony in Peru, Guevara did something unusual. Instead of treating patients from a distance, as doctors commonly did at the time, he shook their hands. He ate with them. For him, disease wasn't the only illness. Injustice was. Years later, he would write, "I am not the person I once was."
I am not the person I once was. All this wandering around our America with a capital has changed me more than I thought.
The motorcycle journey hadn't merely changed his route, it had changed his destination. He no longer believed poverty was an accident. He believed it was a system built on inequality, foreign corporations, political elites, and, increasingly in his eyes, American influence across Latin America. And thus, the revolutionary was being born. By the mid-1950s, Guevara had embraced Marxism. He had reached a dangerous conclusion, that injustice could not be voted away. It had to be overthrown. It was around this time that destiny introduced him to another revolutionary, a Cuban lawyer named Fidel Castro. Along with Fidel's younger brother, Raúl Castro, they met in Mexico in 1955. By the next day, Ernesto had made his decision. He would leave medicine behind. From that day onwards, he would simply be known as Che. A year later, 82 revolutionaries crowded onto a small yacht named Granma. Their destination? Cuba. Their mission? Overthrow the dictatorship of Fulgencio Batista. On the 1st of January 1959, the revolution triumphed. Behind that revolution was also a son. A rare photograph of Che embracing his mother revealed a softer human side of the man known for rebellion. Che had just helped overthrow a dictator. The guerrilla commander exchanged military fatigues for government office. Che became president of Cuba's National Bank, later Minister of Industries. He represented revolutionary Cuba across the world. His government launched sweeping reforms. Land owned by wealthy estates was redistributed. Healthcare expanded dramatically. Education reached remote villages that had never seen a school. Mass literacy campaigns sent thousands of young volunteers across the country. Millions of Cubans gained access to doctors and classrooms for the first time. Supporters still point to these achievements as proof that the revolution delivered dignity to ordinary people. But every revolution carries a shadow, and Cuba was no exception. Political opposition was crushed. Independent newspapers disappeared. Multi-party democracy gave way to one-party rule. Dissidents were imprisoned. Freedom of expression narrowed. Che defended these actions without hesitation. To him, a revolution under attack could not afford hesitation or compromise. His most controversial chapter unfolded at La Cabaña fortress, where revolutionary tribunals tried officials accused of torture, murder, and abuses under Batista's regime. Dozens, and according to some historical estimates, possibly hundreds, were executed following these trials. Supporters argue that many had committed serious crimes, and that revolutionary justice reflected the chaos of the moment. Critics argue the trials lacked due process and became instruments of political repression. It remains one of the darkest and most fiercely debated chapters of Che's life. Perhaps because it forces an uncomfortable question: can justice survive when victory becomes more important than fairness? Che believed revolutions demanded sacrifice, not only from those fighting them, but from those standing in their way. He once argued that revolutionaries had to be driven not by wealth, but by love.
At the risk of seeming ridiculous, let me say that the true revolutionary is guided by a great feeling of love. It is impossible to think of a genuine revolutionary lacking this quality.
He dreamed of creating what he called the new man, a citizen motivated not by personal profit, but by collective responsibility. The revolution, he insisted, had to cross borders. Most revolutionaries stop once they seize power. Che believed that that was where the real work began. He looked at Cuba not as a destination, but as a launching pad. Not just one revolution, but many. He famously called for creating 2, 3, many Vietnams. His idea was simple: If revolutionary movements erupted across Latin America, Africa, and Asia simultaneously, the United States would be forced into conflicts it could never fully control. To Washington, it was a declaration of ideological war. The CIA began watching him closely. In 1965, Che quietly disappeared from public life in Cuba. Rumors spread across the world. Had he fallen out with Fidel Castro? Had he been assassinated? Had he defected? The truth was stranger. He had left everything behind voluntarily, even his family. He traveled secretly to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, hoping to assist rebels fighting after the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. He expected another Cuba. Instead, he found chaos. The rebels lacked discipline, leadership was fractured, supplies were scarce. The people were unconvinced. For perhaps the first time, Che encountered something his ideology had underestimated. Revolutions must belong to the people living them. The Congo mission collapsed. It was his first great failure. Most people would have stopped there. Che didn't. In 1966, he vanished again, this time into Bolivia, using a false identity. His dream had become even bigger. Bolivia wasn't the final objective. It was supposed to ignite a fire that would spread through Peru, Argentina, Chile, and beyond, a continental uprising. But reality proved unforgiving. The local peasants refused to rally behind a foreign revolutionary. Bolivia's own Communist Party withheld full support. Food became scarce, medicines ran out, radio communication failed. The jungle became less an ally and more a prison. Meanwhile, the Bolivian army started closing in, and they were not alone. Their elite battalion had been trained by the United States Army Special Forces. The CIA provided intelligence and tracking support. Among those involved was Cuban exile Felix Rodriguez, working with the agency. For Washington, this wasn't merely about one man. It was about containing an ideology before it crossed another border. The domino theory dominated American foreign policy. If one nation embraced communism, would the next fall, and then another? Whether that fear was justified remains debated. But in the Cold War, perception often mattered more than reality. On the 8th of October 1967, everything came to an end. Inside the narrow ravine of Quebrada del Euro, Che's small guerrilla band was surrounded. A firefight erupted. Bullets tore through the trees. Che was wounded in the leg. Escape became impossible. According to widely reported accounts, he told the soldiers, "Do not shoot. I am Che Guevara. I am worth more to you alive than dead." He wasn't begging. He understood something his captors also knew. A dead revolutionary tells one story. A living revolutionary can reveal many more. He was taken into a tiny schoolhouse in the village of La Higuera. A photograph of him in handcuffs, surrounded by Bolivian soldiers and a CIA operative, would later define the moment. The world didn't yet know it, but history was waiting outside the classroom. The following morning, the order arrived. Bolivian President René Barrientos had decided there would be no public trial. Why? Because a trial might transform Che into a global spectacle. A rescue attempt was possible. A speech from the dock could inspire thousands. Better to end the story quickly. The CIA reportedly preferred to question him further. The Bolivian government refused. On the 9th of October 1967, Sergeant Mario Terán entered the room. Che reportedly looked at him and said, "Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." Moments later, the shots rang out. At 39 years old, Ernesto Che Guevara was dead. His body was flown to Valle Grande in Bolivia, laid across a concrete laundry sink inside a hospital washroom. The government showed proof. The revolutionary was dead. Doctors amputated both of Che's hands. Officially, it was for forensic identification. His fingerprints would confirm beyond doubt that the body belonged to Che Guevara. rumors spread anyway. Some claimed they were trophies, others imagined darker conspiracies. The military secretly buried his body in an unmarked grave near the Valle Grande airstrip. For almost 30 years, nobody knew where he lay, until 1997. Investigators, guided by witness testimony and forensic evidence, uncovered the remains. Che returned to Cuba, this time not as a guerrilla, but as a national icon. Thousands lined the streets. The revolutionary who had died anonymously in Bolivia received a hero's farewell at home. There's perhaps no greater irony in modern history. Che Guevara dedicated his life to fighting consumer capitalism. Today, his face is one of the most commercially reproduced images on Earth. An image captured by Cuban photographer Alberto Corda appears on t-shirts, flags, posters, coffee mugs, phone cases, luxury fashion, even products manufactured by multinational corporations, the very kind of corporations he spent his life condemning. A Marxist who became a global brand. So, who was Che Guevara? A doctor who abandoned comfort to fight injustice? Yes. A man who helped expand healthcare and literacy in Cuba? Also yes. A commander linked to executions, political repression, and one-party rule? That too forms part of the historical record. He doesn't fit neatly into the categories we prefer. Hero, villain. Neither word is large enough. Perhaps the most dangerous people in history aren't those driven by hatred, but those driven by absolute certainty. Che believed history could be forced to change. Perhaps sometimes, but sometimes the cost is measured in lives. George Orwell once warned, every generation imagines itself to be more intelligent than the one that went before it, and wiser than the one that comes after it. Che belonged to a generation convinced it could redesign the world from scratch. Whether that dream was noble or naive is a question history still refuses to answer. Because nearly 60 years after his execution, his revolution is over. His government has changed. The Cold War has ended. The Soviet Union has disappeared. Yet, his face remains. Perhaps that's why Che Guevara still matters. Not because he settled history's arguments, but because he embodies them. Can violence ever create justice? Can equality survive without freedom? Can a revolution remain pure once it takes power? The ancient Greeks imagined the phoenix, a bird that died in flames, only to rise again from its own ashes. The phoenix wasn't immortal because it couldn't die. It was immortal because every ending became another beginning. Che Guevara's revolution ended in a schoolhouse in Bolivia. His legend did not. So, the next time you see that familiar face, on a wall, on a banner, or on the t-shirt of someone who may know nothing about the man behind it, ask yourself one final question. Are you looking at a revolutionary? Or are you looking into a mirror that history keeps holding up to see how far human beings are willing to go for an idea?